I think those drywall guys must just cuss every time they see one of those curves.
A lot of curve cuts, to
Yeah.
say the least. So then for South Campus, so we got a couple drone shots here, a few things that you'll see going on in there. We got a roof deck that's going in on the new office, an addition entry area. They've got a lot of the exterior framing there at that new office and entry area complete, as well as that overhead shot of the new addition. So you can kind of see the overall footprint of that new storm shelter and classroom area space. Kind of on the inside, which you can't see necessarily from the drone, but they've got final grading, the sand cushion that's taking place inside the storm shelter, and they've got that concrete slab poured back as well. And then on the roof of that storm shelter, so they've got a concrete deck that's actually been poured for that as well. They've got a lot of temp heat going on in that building still, unfortunately, hoping to be done with that soon, but trying to drive the frost down so they can start getting the MEP underground going. Roofing of that storm shelter is also going to be ongoing. They're going to be doing that along about the same time as that office addition. And then demo on the inside as well. So inside the existing classroom, that's been completed. That's the portion that's connected to the office addition. And then demo has also been completed in the new science rooms along with the new associated underground plumbing. So then once they get that underground plumbing, they'll get that poured back, and then they'll be able to start framing. So in the next couple of weeks here, we'll have some walls and spaces to look at. So on North Campus, we've got, go to the next picture just a second. There you go. So on that precast shot, those two photos there, they've got 159 precast panels that make up that field house. Each panel weighs about 30,592 pounds. So that's over 4.8 million pounds, or about 325 school buses. Around the exterior as well in one of the previous two photos. So they've got a lot of brick going up around the exterior there, so you can see the right photo is actually the construction lab and auto shop and that exterior brick there. But when it's all said and done, there's going to be over 1.5 million bricks used on this building. In total working hours so far, they've got 45,000 into it and about another 260,000 more to go. So just a little bit, just a few years worth of hours there. As far as some of the interior though, they've got framing in areas N, M, and L. So inside that 3-story, what you can't see from the drone is about 115 people pretty much on every single floor of that building working on framing, MEP, rough ends above ceiling and in walls. They've got a lot of backing and blocking as well, getting to get one side of the drywall actually finished, so to be able to walk through and start seeing the spaces take shape. Fireproofing, so it's not as exciting, but very important. We've got that almost wrapped up through every floor, which once that's done, that kind of releases a lot of extra interior work to get going. You still see some yellow, still be seeing yellow for quite a while as we go around that exterior, but they're working on that sheathing, roof blocking, and roofing in pretty much all of those areas. So you can see the metal deck now, so we're currently working on getting the roofing insulation and all that stuff watertight. And then on the field house, some of the things you can't see necessarily inside, but they've got all the steel erection and detailing done, and they've actually got just about all of the decking now placed on that as well. But they're working on CMU stair towers, and then once we get the roof on that part, then we'll start doing the underground MEP, and then it'll really start taking shape. Some of the auxiliary stuff that we got going is concession stand. So pretty much the entire structure of that is just about wrapped up. They've got a little bit of steel decking and detailing to do, and then we'll get the roof on, and then we'll start working on finishing that out. Area G around the existing building, which is kind of the west side of the existing 2-story there, that butts it up to the new 3-story. working on doing some of the demo and windows and getting some of those openings cut in. So there's quite a few different connections through each of the existing building into the new spaces that they're working on, doing that kind of 2 windows at a time throughout the whole, basically all the way around that building. And then in area Q, working on MEP demo in the south locker rooms, and then the boiler rooms are getting a lot of stuff wrapped up with equipment. Oh, really cross it.
Well, AJ can build a building like that, but he can also fly a drone really well. It might be the more fun part of it.
I think you gotta get into the drone footage though, I'd like to see you down there. maybe.
Oh, there you
Next
go.
time.
Yo.
Next
And have
video.
to drive away from it.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Provide some good perspective of
Yeah.
how massive it is too.
So operating, or maintaining a construction project while we have school in the building is no small task. We still have 1,100 kids and 150 staff members reporting to that building every day. And so we've been working really close with Kraus Anderson to make that process work. And, hats off to the North Campus teachers and staff and administrators who have really hung in there through, not all of which has been super pleasant, and to the students as well at North Campus, because we know that that's not always pleasant going to school in a construction zone. There have been some challenges that we've been addressing the last few weeks, specific to concerns around air control, because construction can get stinky too. And so some of those things are diesel fumes, because there's a lot of lifts outside that need to get equipment up on those roofs, and those are diesel operated or diesel run machines. And so those fumes can be a bit of a problem. So it's been some trial and error trying to figure out how to make sure we keep those fumes away from the building as much as we can. And then tarring roofs. Tarring's a pretty stinky job. And we found out there is a way to make it less stinky. And so we've been working with contractors to figure that out. And so we think we've got the tar thing pretty figured out. We also hired a third party to come in and do some air quality testing. We had been testing, and Kraus Anderson took it upon themselves to test the air quality in those rooms that are near the construction zone on a daily basis. And we hired a third party to come in and test the air too, just to make sure that our tests are working, Kraus Anderson's tests are working, and that everyone agrees on these test results. And the third party felt really good about that the air is very safe in those spaces. It's not always, it doesn't always smell like flowers. Sometimes it stinks. And so there have been times we've had to relocate some teachers to different parts of the building for a day, or maybe multiple days. That's been a real challenge. And so again, we thank our teachers for hanging in there with us. The South Campus administrators are on top of it. And then Kevin Fernandez is our project manager, and Dan Rozier, Director of Building Operations. They've been on top of it, and then AJ's team's been outstanding. So we met with a group of teachers. Tiffany Dietrich with the Teacher Association has been really engaged in this process, and we've been communicating with her. Tomorrow we're going to be meeting with that whole staff just to kind of review where we're at with that process and keep the communication open. and keep the project moving forward.
Ms. Floyd?
One of my sons is actually at North Campus, and it must not be too bad because it's been crickets. I haven't heard anything from him, and he would definitely tell me if he was smelling something or hearing something. So it must not be incredibly bad.
Well, and the third factor is noise. Sometimes there's some noise issues too, there's construction guys aren't as quiet as you think they might be.
We've been trying to find the drill silencers.
Yeah. Well, and AJ, they'll tell you, if noise is a problem, you let me know, I can get that shut down right away. And for the most part, I mean, I think our staff understands we gotta keep the project moving, and so we put up with what we have to put up with, and if it's unbearable, then we need to address it and, figure out a different plan. So we've been doing that almost on a daily basis.
Mr. Hunter?
I was just out visiting North Campus and Central, so I saw both sides of the noise. And I was just so impressed with how they're using the space and how they're using the media center, and their attitudes were so good. Just, it'll be worth it when it's done. Was the attitude. So very nice.
Yeah, it's coming along great. Like you said, like over 300 people working on that project.
Yeah, I mean, generally, we're right around 160, and it can fluctuate by as much as 50, depending upon what
A couple hundred people in some days now. Amazing.
Ms. Daniels?
Have you had any weather delays or anything? I know you talked about if it's ever going to thaw. So I'm just wondering, either that way your spring's coming and, there's all kinds of things to think about.
Yeah, I mean, when we have weather delays, usually we just pick up that time, either in overtime or working on weekends. So we work around what we can get, so. And or fight it with hundreds of millions of BTUs that we crank in.
Make your own weather.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for all of your work and for your updates.
Thank you for having us. Have a good evening.
Yes, thank
you.
you. Thanks. We'll move on to discussion item B2, FY 22-23 budget adjustments. Mr. Wall.
Okay. Should I take that? I only have a few slides here, but. Thank you. All right, Chair Ellingson, members of the board, our student representatives, thanks for being with us tonight. And all my colleagues, we presented at the last board meeting, the March 14th board meeting, budget cuts, and the board members had a lot of questions, and we some good discussion that night. So tonight we'll review those again, and then a later action item tonight will be for you to approve the proposed budget adjustments for 22-23. So last month and really multiple times throughout this winter, we've talked about these budget adjustment guiding principles. We identified these before we started the process. What are going to be the ground rules for how we move forward? And we identified our highest priority will be to minimize, I'm not going to be good at that, so thank you. To minimize the impact on the classroom. And so we've had previous rounds of budget adjustments the past few years, and we've done a pretty good job of holding true to that. In fact, when you look at the 21-22 XU Metro class size study, we're among the lowest of school districts when it comes to average class size. So we told you, I think the last round, that we were going to really try our best to stay away from anything that impacts the classroom. We made some administrative changes and adjustments. We made some used the finance tools that we could use, of which there's not a lot remaining that we can use, but there are some. And we were able to keep those away from the classroom. This time we'll see that's not going to be quite as easy at the elementary school level. We're not going to see much impact there in terms of classroom. In fact, we're going to stay within our pre-COVID classroom class size averages. At the secondary, where actually our staffing levels have increased quite a bit over the last number of years, we're going to see some reductions. will still be, we believe, around the middle of the XU class size study in terms of average class sizes. Right now, we're near the very lowest intersecondary for class sizes. However, we know that average class size and what might be in any given classroom can vary. And so if we're going to offer a lot of elective courses with small enrollment, then we're going to pay for that somewhere else. And so there might be some required courses that have higher average class sizes and then elective courses that have lower. And it's a balance for us to find what's the right balance there, because we want our students to have lots of choice. And if you're going to have choice, you're going to have to balance that out with other courses. And so our students have enjoyed a lot of course choices, and we're going to try to do our best to continue with that. But that's a bit of that balance, is trying to. If we don't have enough students to run a class, of course you can't run a class. We can't afford to run a class with 13 students. Okay. So secondly, we'll remain committed to our equity commitment. So this has been at the forefront of all of our budget discussions, and I will say with some confidence that if at any point any of us lost track of that, somebody in the room very quickly brought us back to it. And so proud of the team that we worked with who consistently reminded us of our commitment to equity. And those aren't always easy things, easy choices, and there are things, that conversation can be different depending on the topic. But we remained committed to our equity commitment and proud of our team for moving through that process. Adjustments will be sustainable for multiple years. So if we're addressing a fund balance issue, sometimes a one-time cut can fix a fund balance issue. When you're trying to fix a structural imbalance in a budget, then you really need sustainable budget adjustments. And so that's what we're really focused on. But we need to get multiple years, knowing that, in 3 years' time, things will change and we'll be making different decisions on how we keep our budget structured and balanced. And so right now, these adjustments need to last us at least a few years. Attrition. So attrition will factor into staffing reductions. So there are cost savings when we have a retirement or a resignation of someone who's been with us for a long time, and they'll be at a higher pay rate than an employee coming in. We predict some of that within our budget, and so we factor it in. We know that we're going to see some retirements, and that outgoing teacher or support staff member is going to leave us at a higher rate than the incoming person, so there's some natural savings there, and that's considered in this budget. Staffing across the district are encouraged to share ideas of how to decrease spending and increase revenue. So we spent a lot of time with all of our buildings talking through the budget, the same presentations we did for the board, we did for all of our buildings. And so we encouraged discussion and feedback. People shared things that they really value. The commitment to equity is something that our staff across our buildings have a strong value for. And so ideas came up, and so we're thankful to our staff for sitting through budget presentations, but also for them sharing their values and ideas. So our target for the 22-23 budget adjustments was $3.8 million. Okay. Next one. So again, before we get into specifics on.
Can we ask a question really quickly?
Oh, sure.
This is Daniel's back on the staff, encouraged to share ideas. Were there any great increased revenue ideas from staff, besides that we had this huge state surplus that we haven't been blessed with yet?
Oh, I should have pulled that together. We did have ideas. I wouldn't say there was a lot of revenue producing ideas. Yeah, there weren't a lot of ideas that were going to generate a lot of savings or a lot of revenue.
Just curious. I know those are
Yeah.
conversations to have. Just wondering if somebody had this brilliant idea.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. We encourage people, like, once we get off this meeting, call us if you want to discuss it. And we did have people call and say, I just didn't understand this.
Yeah.
or explain to me this.
Yeah. Great. Dr. Lester?
I'm assuming, as you discussed it with staff, and having been a world language teacher, I know over the years the ups and downs and how much enrollment impacts, and we've changed languages and added them. And it's extremely painful. But I think those are some of the things that you get when you have an enriched program. And I'm just wondering, what's the balance if you don't have college in the schools for an advanced language, any language, and then they can go to Century and pick up that class? How does that budget balance out when we lose a percent? What does that cost us per class? When,
Well, like
let's
what
say you
does,
have 10 kids that can't take college in the schools,
oh,
German,
okay,
whatever.
so if we eliminated that CIS course
Right.
and then the students left us,
Yeah, they would. To pick it
yeah, it would be, I mean, you lose in that game for sure. Depends, it's a percentage of essentially the state funding. So if they went to Century, let's say, and they did one class there, then essentially would lose that percent of their state funding. And the university would claim that. It's kind of it's a win for them, but it's a lot lower tuition than they would charge if that student were paying for it.
Well, I know our kids, having worked in the high school for 30 years, they're really smart about looking at how they can cut down their freshman year. A lot of kids graduate with a lot of credits, and I can see them. It's nice to keep it in the high school if you can, but if you can't, they're still going to pursue it, and I just wondered what the loss will be.
Yeah, it
What
would be in
percent?
that $1,200 a course, I think, a year-long course.
So you'd
would
have
be
to
about
lose
right.
a lot to keep a
Yeah, and
section.
we offer a CIS course, it's $145 a student is what we pay for a CIS course. So it's definitely our advantage to do that. Of course, we're paying the instructor in that case. They go to Century, and Century is paying the instructor.
Right.
So they carry all the expense. If it's CIS, we carry all the expense.
And I know we used to get, do we still get non-MEDI kids coming in? Because they don't have a very rich, Language
Yeah, we get a
choice.
few. We've had a few, we have, it seems at least one every year, depending on the course.
and I guess my only other question on the FTEs at the secondary level.
Dr. Lester, can we move into that
Sure.
next slide so that we
Sure.
can look through all of these?
Yeah, so I'll just go through these kind of one at a time, then we get to each. I'm happy to discuss those. So, again, I want to thank not only those who paid attention during presentations, but to our principals, to all of our cabinet members who spent countless hours working on getting us to this point, to our school board members who sat through a lot of discussions, asked a lot of questions, and stayed engaged in this process. Our executive finance committee has had several meetings where we spent some time on this and have provided great input. So thanks to all those who have been involved. So as we go through these are numbered, they're not necessarily prioritized, they're not in any specific order, they're numbered just for the benefit of talking about them. So we go through the first two are really chargebacks for the general fund. So in community ed and nutrition, in both of these programs by statute, the revenue is separate from the general fund. And so statute allows for us to charge back to those programs where they're using general fund resources, let's say. So example might be community ed, custodial time. Community ed has a lot of employees, not all full-time, but a lot of part-time employees, and uses a lot of human resources department time to manage all of that. And so that amount of time can be covered within as a chargeback. Same with nutrition services, and so some staffing, lunchroom supervision, custodial staff can be charged back from nutrition services to the general fund. So those are really just finance tools that are a benefit to the general fund, and where we are able to do that in other budgets, it makes sense to do that. And that's a very common strategy that's used across districts. We probably haven't done it as much in White Bear Lake as we could have. And so we've seen more of that in the last few budget rounds. Special education, $179,000. So it's expenditures for special ed typically outpace the spending of our general education programming. We're required to meet a level of spending called maintenance of effort. And so our increases in spending every year certainly meet that maintenance of effort. And so we can actually afford to do some reductions in special ed and still maintain the maintenance of effort. And so we're seeing 179,000 in reductions in special ed. That's 1.2 teaching FTEs, 2.5 support staff, and then shifting 30% of LSN to special ed, where that's actually generates some revenue that we haven't been generating that we could. So thanks to the special ed team for really working hard to come up with some adjustments in a department that's always feeling like it needs more support. For the restructuring between our teaching and learning and special services department, we're able to save $130,000 just by some collaboration there. Technology will be reducing equipment and supply budgets to the tune of $150,000. Shift staff paid by number 6, shift staff paid for by the general fund, unassigned to general fund and bond restricted resources. Some that's project supervision, some with so our capital budget can support positions. Some technology staff can be paid for out of those funds, and so it allows us to do some finance shifts there as well. Number 7, reduce supply and contracted services budget at the district center. 8, we get into some staffing. That's reduced 8 teaching positions to match our pre-COVID class size targets and reduce the DLA principal. So this is really a reset to our 2018-19 class sizes. So as our enrollment has fluctuated, our staffing has got us a little bit, has got us staffed at a higher level than we really can afford to be. And so it's resetting to those 2018-19 class size targets. So our elementary school right now is staffed at a lower level than we targeted for, or excuse me, staffed at a higher level. So lower class sizes than we actually targeted for this year. Number 9, secondary reduced 14 teaching positions. I think at the last meeting we identified that as 16. That was just actually a typo. The budget reduction was correct. It's 14 positions, not 16 at the secondary. And 3.5 gen and support staff. So that's a significant cut at $1,113,000. Again, our secondary class sizes are among the lowest in the metro area, and we'll see those increase to about the average in the metro area. And so principals right now are working on identifying how they're going to most efficiently staff their building. And they're doing a good job with that work. Secondary revenue increase. This is an increase in athletic fees to just below the conference average. That's about $40,000. That won't be a significant increase. It'll vary by sport. Our athletic department did a comprehensive study within our conference of athletic fees and found that ours were among the lowest, and that's great. We don't want to be among the highest in what we charge our students for athletics. And so there'll be some revenue increase there, but again, just below the conference average for activities. And to remind folks that there's lots of support for students who can't afford to participate in athletics or feel like they can't. White Lake Ed Foundation actually has several funds that are geared toward just full participation in athletics. That can cover not only, let's say, the activity fee, although some students won't even be charged an activity fee depending on their income qualifying level. But it might just be like, well, I know my fee is waived, but I can't even afford basketball shoes. Then the Education Foundation can help with just any cost of participation. And teams do have team fees. I think Bennett referenced that at the last meeting, like the $15 t-shirt or whatever. And so that's just a practice, that can be the practice package that the students keep. So it's not part of their uniform, it's just a practice piece, and then it remains the property of the student. Teaching and learning, restructuring the calendar, this is number 11 for instructional coaches. Have some software that they felt like is redundant with other software that they have and can do without. And so they were able to identify some reductions there in the tune of $144,000. And then finally, transportation, they increased the walking radius to 1 mile for elementary and 1.5 miles for secondary students. This reduces 3 bus routes. We're currently at 0.5 miles and 1 mile. And I know this is a topic that had significant conversation at the last meeting. And I think many board members thought we should take another look at that and just understand it better. And so we've done that. Our Executive Finance Committee met with Mike Torito, who's with us tonight. We have some questions for him as well. Reviewed that at some depth, and we're able to go through each school's walking distances and what that looks like from a half mile to a mile, and secondary from 1 mile to 1.5 miles, and even up to 2 miles. And so our original proposal was 2 miles for secondary. We were able to do that at 1.5 and still meet our target here. And there's another area of concern with transportation that I just think is really important to consider, and probably means we'd be having this conversation even if there wasn't budget implications. And that's around our ability to hire bus drivers. And so you've heard about districts around us who just haven't been able to run all their routes every day. And so parents have been getting phone calls at 6:30 in the morning saying, sorry, we can't run your route today. You can find another way to get your kid to school, that'd be great. And we haven't had to do that once. However, if you look at our how we've had to cover some routes this year, we're lucky that at our transportation office, our office staff also are licensed bus drivers. And so our office staff and mechanics have been on buses almost every day, all year long. And so we've been covering 5, 6, 9, sometimes more routes than that on a daily basis. And so very concerned. We have an aging bus driver staff that's typical across the country. As it's been a great kind of second job or retirement job for folks. And as more and more of those people kind of reach that second retirement, there's not been a lot of people to replace them. And so I'm very concerned about the future of transportation, not only in our district, but just across the nation, and whether the system can support it. So I'm saying that the reduction of 3 buses means that we have a much better chance of being fully staffed or being able to at least cover with office staff again next year and keep all of our buses on the road on a daily basis. One thing I think was interesting to board members who had a chance to go through all of those visuals and see the walking distance was to recognize that we don't ask students to cross hazardous roads. And so when you think of some roads like County Road E being a hazardous road, White Bear Avenue being a hazardous road, Highway 96, and many others, Centerville Road, Otter Lake Road, McKnight Road. So we have lots of roads that we're just not going to ask kids to cross. And so then that half mile or that mile walk distance or 1.5 mile walk distance really gets reduced quite a bit. And that lots of kids, even though they're within the walking distance, because there's a hazardous road that separates them from the school, their transportation. We don't want kids crossing White Bear Avenue in the morning. Too many cars, too much traffic, too many people in a hurry. Okay. I think that is all. I was looking through our staffing levels for bus drivers earlier today, We're down 30% in the last 5 years. We have 30% less bus drivers than we did in 2017. So that's the challenge that Torito and his team at the Transportation Garage have had, just keeping buses on the road every day. And so sometimes people might get a little frustrated. I called the garage this morning, nobody called me back. Well, it's because they're all buses.
So we'll go back to Dr. Newmaster's question and then Ms. Strickler.
Well, if I can think that far back, I was just looking at the FTE cuts. And I think you explained some of it, that the FTEs on secondary are classroom teachers, and that's mainly related to enrollment as well as class size. From what you said, they're not other certified teachers. They're
Yeah,
classroom
so-
teachers currently.
Yeah.
So they're not like a coach or whatever else we
Right.
have.
These are primarily classroom teachers. Yeah. We didn't have cuts within the counseling department. You know,
And learning coaching positions are all still solid.
pretty,
Or were they
yeah, generally
reduced?
speaking, yes. Yeah, we'll still have the instructional coach model for sure.
Well, that was my question on that. And when we get to transportation, and I'm allowed, I'll ask a question then too. Because I did go get a really good presentation the other day. There's one thing that doesn't match with what we had today.
My question was on the Distance Learning Academy. Is the Distance Learning Academy continuing?
Yeah, it's looking like we're not going to be able to continue the elementary distance learning academy. The commitment from the families, and it's just been very, it's been slight. I think many families are ready to get their kids back to school, and we know there are some families that probably would prefer to stay in distance learning. But our response from our distance learning families has been pretty light.
And I've had personal, with Mike Torito, personal experiences and see how he not only covers, but makes sure the culture on the buses are really good. So I think he's a rock star. And hearing that you're down 30% is amazing to me that you continue to run. So thank you.
Ms. Davis, it's just kind of a comment along the lines of the teacher reductions and the support staff reduction. 3 and 8 and 9, just saying that I know, I trust that administration and directors and supervisors have gone over everything with the fine-tooth comb, and I know these are really difficult decisions when you reduce teachers and staff that we know and we work side by side with, and I just want to thank you for those tough decisions, and I know later on in the operational items, we have to, make some changes, and those are difficult with people that have been dedicated to the district and are hardworking and things like that. So I just know these are difficult times, and we've been through it before, and sometimes we get lucky enough that things change, like you said, in 2 or 3 years, and we can make those changes back or whatever. We can be hopeful. It's not going to be forever.
I think in earlier discussions, we've been hopeful that the legislature will come through with additional funds, and we still don't know the answer to that.
Right.
But we're moving forward expecting that.
Hope.
They may not, right? It's,
Right.
They're making less and less progress. Who knows?
I just want to say, having been in that situation before where you're struggling with where are these cuts going to come from, and these are real people with real dedicated purposes for our families and our kids, so I want to come. I know it's difficult.
Yeah, our principals put a lot of heart and soul in hiring just the right people. So we don't want to lose any of those really talented people.
I just want to say that we had I know Angela was there too, and there was an awesome presentation at the transportation department last week, and I was impressed with the people who also have their driving license that work and their work waits for them when they get back after running their route. So that's above and beyond the call of duty. And we got a packet with all of the hazardous routes and, greater minds than mine have looked at the dangers. And my only question, and Mr. Torito maybe can answer this, but we did get notes on boundary information, and it said walk boundary distances were calculated. And it talked about how far they were, and I thought maybe that meant what was going to be required this year, but maybe that's what was last year. Because it said K2 was a half mile. And those are the ones I'm really worried about, the little ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are currently what we have.
Okay, so we're going from a half mile to a mile for all kindergarten.
We have, I think our policy calls for a 3/4 mile for grades 3 to 5. And that's a really inefficient to have a half mile K2 and a 3/4 mile 3-5 because we've got siblings and
Well, and you
so in practicality, it's probably been closer to the half mile for K5.
Yeah, that's about what my kids walk from the daycare to Lincoln. But I'm thinking a mile is a long way for little kids, especially the straggling early grade kids. That your older pack is ahead of the pack. But
Yeah,
anyway,
and
I'm
one
thinking
thing you
safety
see-
wise, so this is last year's reality from households to the edge of the school, as the article said. But this year, you're rounding it up to a mile for everybody?
Yeah, so that's what the proposal is.
Okay, so this was this year. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Thompson?
I just had, so for the special education reductions, where are we reducing those? Is that part of the email you sent us, Wayne, or is that?
Yep, so some of that is through attrition, so retirements. And then the unrequested leave that we'll be talking about is a reduction in our motor team. So we're going to be cutting back on one person in the motor team, and that gets us consistent with our metro area caseloads. And then they have a really nice model where they invest in the paraeducators and the teachers and do more of a consultation model. So we're kind of looking at how that work looks to make sure that we continue to provide that high level of service.
Did you say motor team?
That would be our physical therapist, our occupational therapist, and our physically impaired teacher.
Well, so then I just have a question regarding the email that had talked about the ALC school. Is that part of these reductions, or was that just a separate
It's included in the secondary.
in the secondary? Because for me and I understand these are all very difficult decisions, but I find that giving those students more time alone, I have an issue with, just because those are students who usually typically need to have guidance continually to ensure that they stay on track and that they're not, falling down paths that may lead them. Like, we're leaving them alone and they're not getting as much instruction time and we're giving them more personal study time. To me, that tends to not always be a good thing.
The hours that there would be more personal study time are hours that are less attended right now. So we would still have the hours that, Gretchen's still looking at different options, but they wouldn't be losing that, that personalized options that they receive right now. I agree with you that we don't want the students to lose what they have right now, but really thinking creatively about first hour and sixth hour and where students are having to leave because of work or having to, make sure that there's still options for them for learning and making sure that they're successful. So we do have a lot of kids there that can be successful with some of that, more flexibility in that, and they have to leave because of work or they have outside commitments. So how do we create that flexibility there while they're still being successful? But these are what Gretchen's looking at right now with her staff are really, a couple hours that are hours that students are struggling to come to more consistently. But there is kind of that core at least right now, you know, it
Yeah.
changes because I wanted for sure that her staff gets to partner together and really think through it. But what can we do to make sure we are providing that support? Because we want our kids to for sure continue moving forward successfully.
Well, that's good to hear. Just
We
because
did,
that's more like the tech school too, because those students are coming and going and there's all different, so that makes me.
We did a study of staffing and program costs of ALCs across the metro area and found that we have a really expensive model for an ALC. And so we can continue to offer really good programming at our area learning center, but we need to be really mindful that the programs has gotten very expensive, and it's just got to be in line.
Yeah.
And so there'll be some changes, and the goal is still to support those kids fully.
The ALC is where I started in my career as an administrator. It's
Yeah.
super near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about looking at the program, but also I understand it's hard for sure.
Well, and I figured the work was well thought out and I just appreciate like the explanation a little bit.
No,
because it's helpful.
absolutely.
And Allison and Principal Gretchen Harriman have been working really closely together on this and have some great ideas on how to make sure that program continues to just, knock it out of the park.
They have an amazing staff that I really think will come up with great ideas with Gretchen and then whatever we can do to support. But we want to have multiple paths for our kids to earn their diploma and make sure that we're not losing kids. So I think we have a lot of opportunity here. So that's great. Yep.
And just on a side note, the transportation presentation was fantastic and the work that you all do there. And again, tell the drivers, I can't appreciate them enough. I don't know how you've done it, but you have. And it was pretty mind blowing to see the intricacies and everything that goes into the work that you guys do there. And it really is. I'm amazed that we have been able to do what we've done this year. So
Great staff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Boyd?
I forgot to ask this when we had the transportation meeting. If we're down 30%, was any of that due to COVID? And would any of that 30% be coming back?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit, but probably not.
I mean, it's obviously an older subset that's,
They're probably not coming back.
They're not coming back, probably because they let their license lapse, their CDLs at some point, so re-license probably
One comment, living in the township for many, many years, there's a lot of no sidewalk areas. And so I know you can't say, okay, you're in the township, so you, with no sidewalk, so you get to, I just want to say, there's some areas where I would worry a little bit about the kids walking, and hopefully there's going to be a age range where there's surprisingly younger kids. I mean, we have a lot of things we worry about at night, right, and that's one of them. Because our district is so big and all of it is, these paths to school.
Then we have some, think of Otter, Otter's in the township and it has Otter Lake Road going through it, which is a hazard. So that really takes care of.
Stillwater Road's a hazard. I mean, there's a busy street.
Yep.
But just things to think about. I know these are tough, like I say, tough decisions, well thought out, but.
But we have a path that leads into Otter Lake from the back. And so
Yeah.
that serves a lot of those
Yeah, that's
households
really
back
nice.
there, and we maintain that.
Right.
if I remember too, wasn't Otter one of the ones that really, after we looked at all the hazards, the walking, it would really shrunk down.
Yes.
The kids that would actually be
Yeah.
walking.
It was mainly the
Very-
kids
Yeah,
behind the school that had access
Yeah.
to the walk path
Yeah.
to get to schools where it ended up.
Good to know.
I mean, that seemed to be the circumstance for all of our elementary schools, save Omeka, because Omeka's got the biggest walkable area. I mean, I live a half mile from Omeka and I see all of the kids walking in packs to school, from all different directions. It's very walkable in Hugo, at least on the west side of 61. But then you get to North Star and most of those kids are gonna get bused because they all have to cross 61 or they're all south of that. So after the presentation, I felt much, much better about the elementary students walking that distance and even the secondary students because of those because of those certain roads where you can't cross, it created those areas where it looks like they're gonna be walking really, really long distances, but it shrunk that down. So I appreciate everything you guys put together. That was incredibly helpful.
Any final questions? I appreciate all this work.
I do have one more.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
At the secondary level, is this, and I thought I asked this at the previous meeting, is this middle school level or high school level, these FTEs? Is it majority one or the other?
I would say maybe a little more at the middle school because we have a large class leaving 8th grade. So the class leaving 8th grade and the class coming in 6th are in balance. So they're losing more than they're gaining in that case. North Campus, on the other hand, is going to have the largest number of students it's had in a long time. We're actually seeing an increase in staffing at North Campus.
Well, thank you for all this. These are really painful decisions that involve real humans on all sides. And so I'm grateful for all this work. And thank you again to Mr. Trito. I felt much better seeing the maps. So, thank you. All right. With that, we will move to discussion item B3, School Board Communication Protocols Overview. Dr. Kevachek.
Thank you, Chair Ellison. Nick Waldsberger is here. Along with Nick, he is here to provide an overview on school board communication program. Let him jump in.
I feel so far away.
I know it is a long table.
I know. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to see you again. I have some handouts and I have some extras if anybody in the audience would like some. I think there are 15 copies, so make sure the board members get a copy and then we can divvy up others as well. It's kind of a follow-up to some earlier discussion we've had where we wanted to make sure that we had a clear understanding of the school board's role and responsibilities, and not only for the board to have that understanding, but also for the public to have that understanding as we move forward. Then we also want to talk about some communication protocols. In other words, ways to communicate to the public about certain matters that might be outside of the scope of your authority as school board members. And so that's really the purpose of today. It's a truncated version of my general presentation on the rights and roles and responsibilities of school board members. In terms of responsibilities on the bottom of page 1, you'll see that the statute defines your responsibilities. Furnishing school facilities, arranging for transportation, which you've just discussed today, prescribing textbooks, curriculum evaluation, levying for funds, something else that comes up in discussion, paying your claims, and prosecuting and defending actions, which is where you have somebody like me represent you in legal actions. And the key thing that you'll note about each one of those items is that you can only do them where? Right here, up in a school board meeting. So your responsibilities by statute are also prescribed to things that you can do in a school board meeting. When you turn to the second page and look at your authority that the school statutes give you, the state statutes give you, that's to enter into an agreement for necessary goods, services, etc. Employ and discharge employees, contract for services, procure insurance, receive donations, establish school programs, including summer school programs. Talked about extracurricular activities today, and then also the least favorable of those is expelling students. Again, only one place you can do that, and that's within a school board meeting. And that's critical because we'll talk about this in a bit. The only time you have any authority to do anything, except for the school board chair, who has a few notable exceptions, the board members can only act here when there's a quorum present at a school board meeting. You have no authority outside the meeting to act individually or to take any actions on behalf of the board. The next piece of authority you have is policymaking, and of course that's within the board meeting as well. One of the biggest and most important things you do is to hire a superintendent. And I say that's one of the most important things you can do because that is your one employee as a school board. That's the person you can hold responsible for doing or not doing what you want. And so you probably heard me use the analogy before that you pick the destination on the roadmap. and the superintendent figures out how to get there, picks the roads, the routes, the people that are going to drive the buses to get there, etc. You just get to pick that final destination. And if the superintendent doesn't get there, then hold the superintendent accountable for that. But meanwhile, you got to give him that flexibility to get the bus there the way he thinks it's best to get it there. And that's part of governance and not management, more the keys that you talk about. The statutes really vest in you the ability to govern a school district by hiring a licensed superintendent to do your work. And, you know, you've probably heard that the average school board meets less than 72 hours in a year. Maybe you're more than that. I don't know how long your meetings go. Maybe you're less. I know some school districts in greater Minnesota that meet on average less than 2 hours a month. So I think your budget, I don't know what your general budget is, roughly $112 million, something like that.
More than that, yeah.
A little bit more than that. So who would ever think you could run a $112 million organization in 72 hours, whatever the case might be? Nobody would. And so you're not expected to do that. You're expected to hire a superintendent who's expected to hire the right people to accomplish that. So examples, you know, when it comes to employment matters, you have big picture decisions like the overall structure, organizational structure, the overall budget, the creation and elimination of positions. That's something else that's on your agenda for today. To talk about the efficiency of school operations, you were looking at that with the transportation discussion that was happening. And general salary and benefits, which you do through approval of collective bargaining agreements. Meanwhile, the superintendent and his staff select and assign personnel, they supervise and evaluate, they direct, they enforce your rules that you create, they transfer, and they discipline personnel. And that's really important because that tells you that's not your role to do that. There's a superintendent I work with up in the greater Minnesota school district, much smaller school district, but he and the school board chair always like to say, watch your own bobber, because they're big into fishing up there. Watch your own bobber. If you're watching someone else's bobber, there's a problem there. And so that school board, it's a very efficient, well-run school district where the board chair will always say, that's not my bobber, superintendent, that's yours to watch. And I think that's kind of a fun analogy to think about in terms of what you should or shouldn't be doing. I talked about before that you act as a body only when you're here as a quorum, and outside of that, you have no individual authority. And that's really purposeful and important because when people approach you and ask you to do different things, it's important that they understand that you can't do those things for them. You might want to help them. You might want to be there and, you know, kind of save the day, if you will, in some circumstances, or at least give them guidance. But your role as a board member doesn't allow you to do that. Your role is really what you can do here together as a board. One of the most common areas of problem that you'll see for school board members is getting involved in responding to complaints. So a community member comes up to you and says, hey, I've got a complaint. Did you hear what Mr. Smith, middle school art teacher, did? I don't even have Mr. Smith is middle school art teacher. Just made that up. But did you hear what he did in class the other day? I need you to look into this. Or can you believe that the school board is going to be considering the non-renewal of this probationary teacher? I need you to look into that. Or can you believe how mean the bus driver was did you hear about how mean the bus driver was the other day? These are all things that are management level decisions that you can't really respond to. But it doesn't mean you ignore them. And in the materials I have laid out, there is a specific protocol for responding. You want to make sure that you're documenting the complaint so it doesn't get lost. Make sure it's going to the superintendent. It's the superintendent's job then to filter it down to the right place. Now, sometimes you might, if it's definitely a building specific level concern, you might send it right to the school board, or excuse me, to the building principal. But make sure you copy the superintendent, because if that principal doesn't follow through, the superintendent needs to know that so he can hold that principal accountable. So we want to make sure we're keeping the superintendent at all times. Then you also want to make sure you direct that complainant to the superintendent so that they know in the future who to go to. Because nobody wants to feel like they were ignored or they weren't heard or their concerns or complaints are going to be addressed. But if you say, I'm going to direct that to the superintendent, and here's the superintendent's address, I encourage you to follow up as well. And let me know if you don't hear back, but I encourage you to follow up as well. That is really the way to address specific complaints. And that proper order of contacts, or chain of command it's sometimes called, is so critically important because you can get yourself into legal liability if you don't follow that chain of command. And you can also create legal liability for the school district. And that, of course, is one of my big concerns. And that can happen in a number of ways. When you get a complaint in, when school board members investigate on their own, which you should never do, sometimes you don't know the rules of the game. You don't know the type of warning that's necessary, whether it's a Tennyson warning, a Garrity warning, or something else that needs to be given. You might not know what the union rights are. Some of you might not know what those union rights are. You don't know what the district has done already, what administration is doing, what the backstory is. And by going and just talking pretty innocently to a few people, you might impair the integrity of the investigation that the district has already conducted. And maybe you inadvertently provide information to somebody that then allows them to shift their story that they otherwise would not have done, or makes them concerned that they're in trouble when they otherwise might not be in trouble. We need to make sure that you're not deemed to be biased if a situation later comes before you. So as a school board member, if you go out and investigate on your own, and that matter comes up later before the board, maybe it's on an employee discipline discharge type of scenario, which is one of those things we all hate to deal with, but sometimes we have to. The last thing you want is to be deemed biased. Or what if it's a student situation? Sometimes we have expulsions, and that sounds simple, like we would always all stay out of student problems and issues. But it can be a little more complicated than it sounds. And I'll give you an example of something that happened recently in a district where there were some allegations made against one student. They ended up not being true, but they were really widespread on social media. And school board members started to weigh in on it, about how this is just completely unacceptable behavior. Conduct that should never happen. And we all agree that the conduct should never happen, but really speaking to this particular issue. Now we have a problem with data privacy concerns. If we did need to discipline people, students may have a problem if and when it comes before the board. And one of the sad things that we're seeing as a trend in our state, that we represent districts across the state, are these repeated false allegations. Sometimes they're true, sometimes they're not. And we don't know until we fully investigate it. But this jumping on the notion of because someone made the allegation, we're gonna believe it's true, is really harmful to our kids who we're entrusted to protect, first and foremost. So when you get into investigating yourself or even commenting, and that can really put you in a bad spot as a board member, and then also from a legal liability standpoint. Also, when you get into investigating on your own, you really undermine the authority of the superintendent, and then by extension, the authority of the folks who are working, the designees for the superintendent, who are doing the job, whether it be building principals or what have you. So what not to do, I have on page 5. You don't want to investigate yourself. You don't want to promise a particular outcome. You don't want to promise confidentiality, because those are all promises you can't keep. You don't want to pick sides, like the example I gave on social media, because you don't know if you might end up on the wrong side, depending on how the investigation shakes out and the facts shake out. You don't want to act outside the process, the decision maker, or offer to personally address concerns, because that's something you can't do. And going below the superintendent is a problem, because that might impair what Wayne is trying to do for you. And I know most of you very much know that. In terms of who you represent, and I've talked before about this, that school board members, there's often a misconception about who school board members represent. Sometimes there's this feeling like, I got voted in because this organization endorsed me, maybe the union endorsed me, maybe this group of constituents in my neighborhood endorsed me, maybe a group that was really opposed to this boundary change endorsed me, and I got to represent them. That is simply untrue and inappropriate to do that. School boards are not political creatures. They're not political in nature, and they never intend to be, despite what people might say and try to reason change. Your job is to represent the entire community with an emphasis on all students. And if we keep in mind from the legal standpoint, the practical standpoint, that point about all students, that will get us out of a lot of trouble, or keep us out of a lot of trouble. Because again, back to that example, when we start picking sides on students, we're not representing all students. We're forgetting the fact that by the very nature, students make mistakes. We expect all kids to make mistakes. Otherwise, they wouldn't live with their parents till they're 18, right? If I wish my kids, I could say my kids never made a mistake. I wish I could say I never made a mistake. I made so many in my life, but we learn from those. And choosing those sides is part of the problem. So we represent all students. And when we talk about what that might mean, I talked about how there could be some private organizations, maybe they're parent groups, maybe they're unions, maybe they're the most well-intentioned groups out there. Maybe they're 99% supportive of the school district. But again, you can't represent them because they're not always going to represent the interests of all students or of the entire community. And I always ask myself a few questions. One, and I'm on the bottom of page 5, does the organization exist to protect the interests of all students? Not many do. That's one of the great things about school board. You're one of the few, literally, in the country, organizations that exist. Your purpose is to protect the interests of all students in your district. Does the organization exist to protect the interests of the district and the community as a whole? What other organization exists for that other than the school board? And who does that organization represent? So you are really uniquely situated. I want to talk for a minute too about that representing all students, the notion of all students, because one of the things sometimes we hear today in our society is that you've got to be a vehicle for legal change. You've got to put a stop to this. And I'm just going to throw out a controversial example that is very prevalent in our society today. The law is well established and clear in regard to the rights of transgender students. There is no question under the law that transgender students have a right to refer to what their preferred name, preferred pronouns, to use a locker room that correlates to their gender identity, to use the restroom that correlates to their gender identity, and to have records that correlate to their gender identity. And sometimes people will say, well, I'm opposed to that. The school board, you got to stand up against that. Two responses to that. Putting aside any personal feelings anyone has. Well, 3 responses. 1, the law is clear and we have to follow the law. We're not going to ignore the law. Number 2, again, you're not a vehicle for legal change. What has happened to every school board that's tried to be a vehicle for legal change? Besides the fact you might end up on the real wrong side of an issue. But you end up paying out a lot of money and don't affect any change. And that's the truth of what happens when you try to use a school district in that manner. And then finally, again, back to my one main overarching point, you represent all students. How can you say you represent all students if you oppose a group of students? You just don't. There's no getting around that as a group. So we have to make sure it's a welcoming environment for all students. In terms of considerations, I also want to mention about particular schools before I go on. So in a lot of districts, and I think it's true in this district too, school board members are assigned to be a liaison to a particular school. And the concept is good in a lot of ways, but sometimes there's a misunderstanding that develops. Sometimes the staff at that school feel like if you're assigned to that school, you represent them, and you're to take their issues back to the board. And that's actually the opposite of what it's supposed to be. You're there as a representative of the board to the school, to hear, to listen to information, to make sure that we're in tune to what's happening there. But you don't represent that school or the issues at that school back to the board. That is not the role, because again, you don't represent organizations, you don't represent particular schools, you represent all students and all schools. If you represented one school, then when we got to a boundary issue, for example, we're going to be fighting with each other constantly instead of doing what's best for the district as a whole, doing what's best for the community as a whole. So, in terms of attending meetings, I have a couple of considerations on page 6 of the materials. Often school board members get put in tough spots. You get invited to meetings for a variety of reasons. And I like to ask these questions. If you accept an organization's invitation to attend a meeting, are you creating a perception that you're there in your capacity as a board member? Do you have any authority to be there in the capacity as a board member, because individual board members don't have any authority unless you've been assigned by the board. Are you there to solve a management level problem? You feel like you're being invited to solve a management level problem, or because this group wants you to support one group over another. If any of those are true, you should really think about declining that invitation, because none of those things would be part of the appropriate role of a board member. And another good question to ask is, are you being contacted because someone's unhappy with something the administration did? Are you being invited to a meeting because someone's unhappy with an administrative decision? I don't like the staffing levels. I don't like the number of paraprofessionals at this building. I don't like the decision in terms of reductions at this particular school. If you're being invited for those reasons, you're being asked to do something that's outside your authority, power that you don't have. I did want to provide you with some sample communication protocols, and that's about on page 6 and then on page 7 of the materials. And I don't mean to suggest that these are lockstep, that you have to say, but I need to give you some examples of ways that you might respond to a particular situation. So when you got a sample response to complaints, I already talked about that one, so I'm not going to read through that one. Sample response to personnel concerns, you might say, thank you for sharing your concerns about, maybe it's a non-renewal of a probationary teacher. Maybe it's accepting somebody's resignation. Maybe, whatever the case might be. Although I appreciate knowing your concerns, I want to clarify the administration is responsible for management, including all personnel matters that do not directly relate to the superintendent's employment. And because your complaint involves a management level issue, I forwarded it to the superintendent, and I encourage you to contact the superintendent as well. That's a kind of perfect response to complaints and personnel concerns. In terms of invitations to attend events, I think it's very wise for you to clarify that you plan on attending as a private citizen, not as a board member. And again, the board members don't have any authority to act on behalf of the board or represent the board. And then with that, you're eager to attend and to learn more about it. Because you don't want to shut people out. You want to hear what's happening. You want to know what's happening in your community. And if you provide that kind of response and someone comes back and says, well, I'm not really sure if you can't come as a board member, well, now you know you got an issue. But giving that kind of response, it's not offensive to anyone. It just tells you why you're there, because you're interested. If you get a request to meet with a current employee, former employee, or a group of employees, this is one of the biggies. It's really easy to get pulled into this. They want to talk to you because we're not really crazy about the terms and conditions of our employment. And you might want to say, well, I'm just there, I want to show support. Well, if they're in a union, you might be violating PELRA, the Public Employment Labor Relations Act, by meeting with them and talking about terms and conditions of employment. Because we can only do that through their exclusive representative, through their union. And so as well-intentioned as you might be, when we do that, we might be creating, again, liability for the district and liability for you. By the way, there are very few circumstances under which school board members can be held personally liable. But the one that is a biggie is when you knowingly act in excess of your authority. And that's why, one of the reasons why I heard about this, because I want to make sure if you know that line, that you know you can stay within and comfortably without ever having to fear that personal liability. So the response to me, I have some sample language there. Again, you don't have authority to address issues such as dissatisfaction with management level decisions. And maybe they don't give you a reason why they want to meet specifically. But if you give a response like the one I provided, that's going to force them to give you a reason or to understand if the reason is something that would be beyond your authority, they're going to not pursue that invitation further. Sometimes we get response or requests to meet to discuss opposition to a particular student group. And so the example I have in here is, thank you for inviting me to meet with you to discuss your concerns about the school board support of LGBTQ students. I'm respectfully declining your invitation. Minnesota law prohibits discrimination based on protected class and guarantees equal rights for all students. I support the law, and as a board member, I want to be sure that I represent all students in the district and would not want to take any action that could be perceived to be unwelcome to any student in the district. It might be hard to write that, but if you're being invited by a particular group, that's the kind of thing you need to come back with. Because when we come back with that, those invitations stop, and that's really what you want in the final analysis. Because it's a no-win scenario if you do show up to a group meeting like that. Then the last two real quick is sometimes we have requests to meet to discuss political affiliations. So I had not too long ago where, and I've changed the facts here for my example, but where a certain political group wanted to meet with a school board member to see how they could help work with the school board member on issues are coming before the school board. Sounds innocent enough. You're not a political body. Why does that group want to work with you as an individual school board member? It's their agenda, not yours. Your agenda is all students. Their agenda is something different. You have to be really mindful. And then lastly, sometimes we get these vitriolic, argumentative inquiries or messages, or sometimes they're just repeated where someone keeps coming back with the same kind of cumulative information over and over. And I want you to know that it is absolutely okay not to respond. My world is litigation. And in the world of litigation, when someone says something that's vitriolic or argumentative, the attorneys say, objection, and the judge says, sustain, which means you don't have to answer. When it's that kind of discourse that you're dealing with, you don't have to answer. It's not warranted. There's no benefit that's gained from answering an argumentative question. When did you stop beating your spouse? Right? That's our classic lawyer line. Well, I never did. Why get into the argument? It's not a question worth responding to. So don't feel because you're in a public office that you have to respond to things like that that are clearly over the top, clearly repetitive, clearly inappropriate. So with that, I know that there is an interest in communication protocols. If you have any questions or other items you'd like me to address, I'm happy to respond to those. Otherwise, I'll stick around for a couple other items on the agenda.
Any questions for Mr. Waldsberger?
I just have a comment.
Dr. Arkin?
This is really good information. The only thing, if I could have my wish come true, anybody that would file for a school board when the campaign begins, if they could have this training, because it was very difficult, I think, for some of ours last time, because they were expecting, like you said, they're a political unit, they're going to do this and this, and they don't understand how we represent all students, and that made it very difficult, I felt, in that campaign. And so that when it comes time, because we're still elected, for people in the public to understand that.
And my hope would be that presentations like this publicly do help that understanding, because it does put board members into a difficult spot, for sure.
An opinion piece to the White Bear Press maybe or something, get it out there because expectations are not reasonable.
And that's why I just really love that notion of representing all students, because if we have that in the back of our mind, that is really the key. And that guides the answer to 90+% of the questions. 90% of the questions are wrong.
Ms. Frankoji?
So a question comes to mind when we're invited to attend events. For instance, the Many Faces events that's through our district that focuses on conversations about equity, race, LGBTQ, whatever. In attending that, I don't feel like I'm putting that group in front of another group. I feel like it's part of supporting all students. Am I right in that thinking, or what?
I would agree with that thinking.
Okay.
I think we want to make sure we're creating an environment that's safe and welcoming for all students. And I say, regardless of anybody's personal views, again, all students, that's the key, and safe and welcoming for all students. So I think that's totally fine. And when the invitation comes through the district, we know that that's a different kind of deal. It's when the invitation comes from outside the district. And sometimes it comes from outside the district in ways that kind of surprise us. I recall a few years back where there were a number of organizations that were trying to limit, and things change with politics, of course, but trying to limit the number of students who were not from the United States and their enrollment in public schools. Now, first of all, unconstitutional. Secondly, putting everything else aside, all students. And my first response to every school board member that got an invitation to something like that, all students. That does not benefit us. But no, I think that's a good question.
I have a couple of questions that I've been thinking about. So obviously, all of this applies to social media as well.
Yes.
And we need to be very cautious on social media. Because there are instances where people might tag us in something or say something to us about our role as board members. So what you're saying is ignore it completely.
Yeah, I think we want to be careful not on social media, not to obviously promise our vote, not to say how we're going to vote, not to take sides on an issue, not to do anything that might alienate a student, for sure, to take sides on students. You know, I think of some of the recent news stories, and now they seem to be popping up in district after district. You know, kids say terrible things. Sometimes they say terrible things at sporting events. And right away, one district says, that is unacceptable, and they're going to jump on. And your district every single district has those issues they're dealing with. And to do that, to jump on social media and do that, is just begging to say, come back in my face when I do that. And again, is that in the interest of all students?
And so just to clarify on that, that goes for our personal social media.
Yeah, and the eyes of the public, you know, I can't control what you say or do on your personal time. And
Right.
Some of you have heard my phrase, on your own time, on your own dime, meaning completely no school district resources whatsoever, on your own time, you're not working for the district in any way. You can say what you want, and the First Amendment allows us to say really idiotic things, really mean-spirited, awful things. But members of the public, right or wrong, always see you wearing that school board hat, and there's no way to take it off. So, and that's true for teachers too. You know, you can't be a teacher and say, I'm here for an open and warm and welcoming environment for all students, and then go out and post on social media something that's contrary. I know you would never do that, nobody would do that. But the reality is that we can't change when we're in this kind of public position. You can't put one view out there and say, no, I actually have a different view. I very strongly agree with you, I guess, this room.
Yes, so it goes along with what Ms. Stripoji was saying, is that if we attend these community events like Many Faces, the logic for me sounds like we can also say on our public pages, I support LGBTQ students, or I support our students of color.
Yes, because you're not taking a side where you're saying, I don't support this other group. Now, if
Right.
you say, I'm trying to think of an example that wouldn't be so over the top, but I don't support the rights of transgender students. Obviously, it's against one group. It's when you say something that's against one group, or I support, let's say there's a group out there that has voiced its opposition to some student activity. You don't want to align with that because, again, we don't have all the details of that student activity. Maybe we do, but we're not going to attack some students, even if they make stupid decisions, because we represent all students.
That's really helpful. The other question that I have is, I think this is so helpful for me as a board member to just, and we have all done training through MSBA about how to be good board members, but I think there's this there's a disconnect between what we do and then what the greater public knows about what we do. And so would you recommend then something like, for example, when I was at MSBA conference recently, another board member from another district said that before every board meeting, she says, we are here tonight, our meeting as a board in public to handle the governance of this district. Just so that it becomes part of the content of the way that we operate as a board to say, this is who we are and this is what we do.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. And I think also when issues come up, sometimes we have issues, for example, during public comment, they come up and we don't typically respond in that same meeting. But you can respond in future meetings, or you can have a general statement at the start of public comment. These are the types of things that the school board addresses. These are the types of things that administration addresses. And if people are going to be making public comment on management level decisions, that's beyond the board's purview. And we're not going to stop you, but I want you to know it's not a constructive use of your time, because those kinds of issues have to be directed to the superintendent, not to this board. So I think it's a wise idea to have some statement like that, and you could certainly do it before public comment, or you could do it at the next meeting after you've had some type of comment like that. But I kind of like the idea of working it in somehow beforehand.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. It's very helpful.
So I asked Nick to stick around as we move into the next topic. You ready to do that?
Yeah, so let's go to discussion item B4, resolution supporting community or commitment to equity and inclusion. Dr. Kazmierczak.
All right, thank you, Chair Ellison, members of the board. So I asked Nick if he could stick around because there might be some questions that actually might dovetail with the previous presentation as well. And I think it provides a good opening for some of the questions regarding the resolution before you. Maybe you have already gotten answered through the next presentation. So we have a resolution supporting commitment to equity and inclusion. So the intent of this resolution is to publicly commit to continue our efforts around diversity, inclusion, and racial equity, and to adopt government speech in furtherance of these objectives. We've talked about government speech before. There's a couple specific in the resolution. There's a couple of specific items, number 14 and number 15, that relate to government speech. So this resolution is consistent with the district's policies and our strategic plan, and adds further clarity around communication. And that specifically relates to the government speech portion. Additionally, the resolution directs the superintendent to develop and implement a systemic protocol for responding to racial and/or biased harm. And as we have seen and as we mentioned here tonight, in recent weeks, there have been issues in other school districts, at sporting events, social media, all those things have come up here earlier. So it's timely for us to consider taking action on this. And I know you got this today, so if you're not ready to take action on it today, I would fully understand that. But my hope that my recommendation that we would potentially do that this evening. So anyway, I guess that's the introduction. And if there's comments or questions at this point, and then again, as I said, I asked them to stick around in case there are legal questions around any of these issues as well.
I don't know who exactly this is a question for, but reading through all this is like a lot of words. But what is being done to like actually enforce this? Because I know this is a lot, but like there's so much that could happen. It's like a really broad topic with racism. But how do we get this out to everybody? Because just reading all this just it's just words.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we have, I'm not certain there's others who can chime in. We have policies in place, we have procedures in place, we have building administrators work with students. When issues arise, they're best dealt with at the school level. We believe we have a robust set of policies in place to give principals the tools they need to be able to deal with situations as they arise. But you're right, there are issues, and we're committed to continuing to improve it as a system, and I think we've come a long way. I think we have a long way to go. And this school board and administration, we've had conversations about this being an important step along the way to actually commit to the work that we have been doing and commit to further work going as we go forward. I don't know if anybody else has, Allison can probably talk, Dr. Gillespie can probably talk about some of the student groups we've worked with and some of the efforts that we're taking. And I specifically mentioned the development and implementation of a protocol for responding to racial and biased harm. That's something we're working on right now. And actually we're using it, we're still refining it, but we're using it right now, and that's relatively new. So I think there are things happening.
So two big things, I think, when students ask that question, and it's a super valid question, is how do we change the culture at school? And that is, how do we help students talk about what school feels like for them and partnering together at school? And so principals are working with leadership groups to talk and really look at that with students. So the high school has some things going on and talking about like, how do we create a welcoming environment for students and what's going on? Because that's the part as adults, we don't know everything that's going on. So our administrators take each situation seriously, they follow through on it. But what we keep hearing is nothing's being done, partly because students don't get to know every single step of a discipline situation, but really what they're saying is things don't change. And so really looking at how do we amplify student voice to say really, okay, the student leadership group, both North and South are working with students to say, how can we create a campaign around positive school culture? Other area districts are doing things with middle school. And so we were just talking about what can we do at our middle schools. And so really what I'm finding for the first time in my career, which it's been a long one already, is that districts are partnering together in a way that they haven't always before. And so when we have an incident of some sort of harm based in race or bias, every single administrator has to call me when it happens so that I know that it's happening and I can coach them through the process of making sure that they're reaching out to families so that they know that we know something's happened at school prior to maybe even getting that far into the investigation, so that people understand that we're taking it seriously. And because social media is so difficult, you know better than I do. But you know, if they have a group Snapchat, which I'm sure that's not even how you say it, but I'm trying. I still have a Facebook, people, so the kids laugh at me. But you know, so then it gets a life of its own. And so how do we have families know, like, kids are talking about it in this group chat, you need to know we know about it and we're going to get to the bottom of it, but we're investigating. And those are things we didn't always do right away, because as administrators, we wanted to make sure we had enough information to reach out to families and say, we've investigated, this is what's happened, this is what hasn't happened, and we actually waited too long. And so those are some things that we're still working through, and then thinking about what types of training do we need for teachers and principals to make sure that they really are connecting with students, because it really starts with the relationships that we have with students and making sure that kids feel seen in school. And this is like Mr. Walsberger was talking about, like, what do we talk about in terms of, did I say his last name wrong, Lisa? Like, you're like the owner of the burger place now, Mick? This will go down there at Waldburger, there we go. Go down in good history, yeah. But so anyways, yeah, I say all that to say we're taking it really seriously and working with students, and it's a ton of things going on, but really it will be student voice to tell us this is really changing. And so then how do we circle back with students and have those leadership groups with their principals?
Yeah, I totally, because there's just a kid can say something blatantly racist to someone, or it could be someone in a big student section, like at a girls' basketball game, which happened recently. And I know can't be one single punishment for everything, but I do feel like I wish this was like talked about more. Like, was it Minnetonka or something with the girls' basketball team with the slurs? Maybe something like, hey, as a White Bear Lake School District, we do not condone this type of behavior, and it could spread to the whole school, or I don't, because there's no one answer, which is why I was asking you guys, because I don't even know the answer. But I know it's a lot, and I think you guys are doing a great job. I know there's so much that's happening, but there's always more to be done.
Well, and really the key is working with the principals and students for things like that, because we absolutely can say those things, and where do we say them so that students really receive that and it's productive so that it changes the environment. And so, you know, when we met with students just to get feedback around how school is feeling, they did give me feedback around even just thinking through consequences. Like, kids really don't want kids to be suspended or kicked out of school. They talked about like really making sure, like, can we talk about like taking away a school dance, or the like delaying yearbook, wanting kids to understand, like, I want you to understand and stop what you're doing so that we can be in school and in community together. And so that's really, I really want to continue to support that student leadership and partnership with the building leaders. But really, and that is something that we've done well in terms of thinking about student leadership, but not always through transforming school culture in the way that we need to right now. So I'm excited about what we can do.
And he was saying earlier, right, that it's more of an administration thing and not a school board thing.
Implementation.
Except I do think this is important.
Wait,
even if-
Dr. Newmaster, sorry. Dr. Arcan had his hand first, and then I'll jump to you.
I just wanted to say I love the question, and I think that this is really important from the last discussion. Everything that was talked about was management, and we don't get involved in that. So the question was, how do we support management? And so by passing this resolution, we're saying we're supporting management in these areas. And so for us as a school board, for governance, by passing this, we're saying we support management, and then they, from there, will figure out ways to move forward. And so that's why it works that way from our standpoint, moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but like hypothetically, of course, what if they made the wrong decision?
Well, then I'm gonna really say, if we don't like the decision they made, then I have the one employee that I can work with the group, would be the superintendent, and that's our discussion there. If the associate superintendent makes a decision I don't like, I go to the superintendent. If a principal makes a decision I don't like, I go to the superintendent, because that's my role. This is the only person that I go to as the board, and then he will handle it. And so that's why the governance piece is, we're supporting, we're expecting the superintendent to implement the management of it. And so that's how our role works. And the important thing with your role is you continually ask these questions, push us forward. Without that, we don't move forward. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Newmaster?
I was going to say almost the same thing exactly. But I do think, yes, these are a lot of words, but they're important words. Like they should put them on a stone tablet and light them up at night that show that we're firmly behind these statements. That's all we can do. That's the governance, the overview. This is what we want. It's not my problem to figure out how it's going to happen, but this has been chewed on by a lot of groups. And I'm really happy to see that everything develops. But this is a good, strong statement to say, this is what we want for our community. And this is what we're behind as a board and as a district. This should be, and you are the mover and shaker as a student to say, but that's not what's happening in the hall. And then there are all these other people that are going to help work on that to build this community.
This is probably more for Mick, just as an explanation for anybody. So as we adopt or don't adopt the resolution, why is it important for us to include the government speech portions?
So what government speech allows you to do is say, we are adopting a specific message as our message without opening the door to countervailing messages. Because generally speaking, within a government setting, public employer setting, if you create a certain type of a forum, anything other than a closed forum, you create what's called a limited open forum or an open forum, then you open the door to people who have different views, kind of fighting your message. But the courts have said, under the government speech doctrine, that you can adopt your own message and prohibit as your positive, welcoming message and prohibit contrary messages. And the leading cases out of the Los Angeles School District, where the district declared the month of June to be Gay and Lesbian Awareness Month. And as part of that, the school district adopted certain messages promoting equity and a welcoming environment. And the plaintiff in that case, Mr. Downs, was a high school teacher who didn't like that message. And so he posted on bulletin boards, contrary in the school, contrary messages. And the principal said, take it down because it's offensive, which probably wouldn't have been enough of a rationale legally. But he said, take it down because it's contrary to the government speech, the message adopted by the school board and the administration pursuant to the school board resolution. And that carried the day in the courts. He later sued and said, you couldn't discipline me for my own free speech. And the court said, you don't have that free speech in front of kids. And you don't have a right to a contrary message. Our message that contradicts the government speech adopted by the school board in that case. So here you are saying, this is our message. this is what we want to advance. And by doing that, you're not opening the door to employees or other individuals who might have a different view to come in and try to spread a contrary message. It would undermine your efforts that way.
So what if, could boards adopt resolutions that were contrary to laws within their state? What?
That's a very good question. The answer is no. There are some very well-known exceptions to the government speech doctrine. One of them is speech that would either advance or inhibit religion, because we know under the First Amendment and the Establishment Clause that you can't adopt speech of that nature. Also, we know in the state of Minnesota, we have very strong laws on political speech and on promoting referendum, trying to advance a referendum, trying to advance a ballot measure, trying to advance a candidate type of thing, that we could not adopt as government speech, some speech that violated those types of laws. So those are two really well-established, known kind of exceptions that we would have to follow. But where it's, where the law doesn't prohibit it, and here in particular, where your speech is entirely consistent with the Minnesota Human Rights Act and cases interpreting that act, I think you're really on strong legal footing.
Thank you.
Mr. Koji?
Okay. I just wanted to respond to just some visits that I had in the last couple of weeks on ways that I've seen administrators reaching out to kids, and one is at Central Middle School with an affinity program in 2 classes with kids, getting their feedback. And I think the VAR program, building the relationships with kids so that you trust us enough to be able to say what you just said at this table. So it's really important that if our kids don't trust us to say, I don't see it happening, I don't see things changing. And Dr. Gillespie's response to that, like she hears you. And I think that's what I see unique about this district and why I want to stay engaged with this district beyond retiring from a position. But I just wanted to share those things with you. And then the government speech thing, I feel like last year we heard a lot of teachers not sure what they could and couldn't post, and this does support them posting something that shows that as a former administrator, to have that backing, it's really helpful.
Sorry, I didn't want it to seem like I was saying you guys aren't doing anything. Okay.
We appreciate your.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want it to sound like that. Okay.
And there's always just room for growth.
Yeah, always and everywhere.
No, you don't ever apologize.
The question was a great question because the conversation that ensued was so powerful.
I have a question, just to clarify the difference between a resolution and a policy.
Yep, so a resolution is a commitment that we do something, and a policy is kind of best thought of as a rule or a regulation. And so this would be your commitment. And you would already have rules and regulations governing the vast majority of all pieces of this. So for example, if we have, we're talking about racial equity, we already have policies that are the rules that prohibit discrimination, that prohibit harassment, that talk about how we're going to react and respond, investigate, and remediate. So you already have the underpinnings of this, if you will. This is your commitment to saying, how do we take it one step further? And I really did like the point that was just made is this helps provide clarity to your administration to say that these are the messages that we endorse and we claim as ours as government speech, so that they don't have to worry, are they stepping out of line? Because when we talk about the role of the school board and a lot of those things that I just went through, only the school board has the power to do this. Your superintendent doesn't have the power to declare this without you. You can give him some power under it, but you are the only body that has the power to declare this. And then the administration can implement and carry it out. So again, this is the commitment. We already have the undergirding, if you will, building up the building through the policies you have.
Ms. Thompson?
I have maybe something in it if we were to pass it tonight that I feel might need to be changed and not having a lot of time to go through all the language. I mean, it all seems to be pretty good, but in number 4, I'm not extremely comfortable with having individuals with disabilities in the same category as individuals with their sexual, or like we broke everything else down. I feel like those need to be separated. There's just something about having individuals because of a disability or their sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, to me is, it doesn't feel comfortable to me. It's like adding those two together. And I feel like it maybe should be separated, like hate speech directed at individuals with disabilities. And I know there's a word and term that people with disabilities, they don't like to be called, and I don't know, maybe you can help me, Lisa, but is it like an individual? It's super similar the way that it's said, like an individual with a disability or individuals. There's like another, I can't think of it because I didn't, yeah, it's just to not, that the disability isn't them itself. It's just something that it's part of them. Other than that, I mean, everything looks great in there. And there might be an extra comma in one area, but I'm not a language arts teacher, so I'm not going to pretend to know that for sure. But that number 4 was the only thing that kind of stuck out to me as I would really like it to be separated. But other than that, it's.
I just have a quick question then. Is there a lifespan for this? Like when you have a policy, it's there until you change it. Is this there until we re-propose something, or does it go away eventually? I guess I don't know. How does that work?
Excellent question. It's there until you rescind it or supersede it.
Okay.
Comment. I was going to make, I think one important thing for individuals with differences is that they're individuals first. And so people first language is here, which I appreciate. They're individuals first, and then they may have a disability or they may have a difference in their sexual orientation. But first, people first language is what I always think is the most important context for any policy or any kind of talk around any difference. So I appreciate that that's first.
Sorry, I'm going back to the race question, but I was reading the official government speech and it says, "We believe Black Lives Matter." And you were saying how there can't be something that contradicts that. But I feel like there's a lot of sayings that do contradict that as like in opposition to that. Would that fall under that person's freedom of speech?
So, and I say contradicted, so meaning like our staff, for example, what we hang on the walls. So if a teacher were to hang on the walls something that's specifically approved here, we believe Black Lives Matter on the wall. And somebody else, another teacher tries to hang on the wall, or another employee, something that would contradict that, we would have the right to remove that. Students do have their own First Amendment rights and actually have greater First Amendment rights in the school setting than employees do. It's a kind of a long explanation of why that is, but particularly when you're out in the structured environment of the classroom. So you're walking in the halls, you're posting on social media, students have much broader First Amendment rights, and their rights get many, many times greater when they step outside of the school grounds and there's no nexus to school. So we can't stop students from the multitude of terrible or unkind things or wrong things they might say outside of the schoolhouse doors. But within the school, we can control what our staff put as messages, and we can limit to some degree what students say, particularly within the structured classroom environment.
Okay, so contradict has to be like, it can't be supporting a different organization?
So, really good question. So let me give you an example. So if let's say a teacher has hanging up on the wall a a sign that says Black Lives Matter. And a student wears to school a shirt that says Blue Lives Matter. The district couldn't discipline the student for that because that student has a First Amendment right, unless you had a regulation that said students may not wear clothing with any messages, because we have to be viewpoint neutral. Same thing if a student came to school wearing some kind of political speech. You know, we can't say you can't wear a pro-Republican or a pro-Democratic or Democrat shirt, whatever it might be. We have to, unless we prohibit all messages, we have to allow that. But now if a student wore something that had a message that violated our harassment policy, went a step further, or if they used the message in a way that was targeted at somebody or harassed somebody, then we'd have the legal authority to address it.
Okay.
So,
Totally
really
makes
good
sense.
question.
Can a teacher hang that on their wall though?
No.
Okay.
And that's the key of this, is that we can, you know, like Mr. Downs in the Los Angeles School District, when he wanted to hang his contrary views up there, they were able to say no. And here, a teacher might not like it, but that is the official school message.
Okay.
So just to kind of get the temperature of the board here, if we were to make the recommendation that Ms. Thompson had, where we split number 4 into 2 statements, we condemn hate speech directed at individuals because of a disability, period. Next line, we condemn hate speech directed at individuals because of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression.
2 separate.
2 separate.
If we do that,
Are we interested in proving this evening? Okay, so then what I would recommend is that we add an operational item. We have like 8 minutes left, unless we want to extend the board meeting. I would recommend that we add that as item 6, operational item, to approve the resolution supporting commitment to equity and inclusion. Robert's rules.
I'd second.
So Madam Chair, what you would need to do is make a motion to amend the agenda to include that operational item, and then get a second to vote on the motion to amend, and then you would vote on the motion separately on the motion to approve the resolution.
Okay, so I move to amend the agenda to add operational item C6 to approve the resolution supporting commitment to equity and inclusion.
So moved. Second.
Second, any discussion? Could we do a voice vote?
You can do just a regular voice vote, and you need 2/3, so if there's someone who's against it, then you can go back and count.
Okay. So I would ask for all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Passes. Thank you for the guidance, Robert. I'm still learning Robert's rules.
And so then we
All
move.
right, so that was number 6 on our operational items. So we will move into our operational items. We have, per our board policy, of 7 minutes to go. I think we can probably get through our operational items in 7 minutes. Madam Clerk?
I think we can.
Okay, so let's move first to operational item C1, action on the FY23 budget adjustments.
Sure. Madam Chair, earlier tonight, we presented on the proposed budget adjustments for the projected 22-23 budget. And it is the administration's recommendation that the board approve those recommendations as presented.
You've heard the recommended action. Can I get a motion to approve? Motion by Ms. Beloit, a second. Second by Ms. Stripe OG. Any discussion? This will require a roll call vote. I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Daniels,
Yes.
Ellison,
Aye.
Newmaster,
Aye.
Strikeoji,
Aye.
Thompson, aye, Arcan,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you. Operational item C2, action on the resolution proposing placement of continuing contract teachers on unrequested leave of absence. Mr. Wall, is it?
I can jump in and, I mean, Nick is here to answer specific questions about the process. So this is a required step in placing continuing contract teacher on unrequested leave. This is in effect no different from non-renewals of probationary staff that we do annually. It's just that tenured staff have additional rights afforded them. So notice of the layoffs will be sent via certified mail this week. All impacted employees have been spoken. I don't know if there's anything else to add, but that's the you haven't seen this before because we haven't done this before, but your time on the board. Kathleen's probably experienced it from the other, been as an administrator.
I got
Marge probably got one back in the day. Maybe Scott has too. And so some of us have experienced it, but this is a normal course of action during not even necessarily during budget reductions. It could be because of a reduction in a program because of enrollment or something like that.
You've heard the recommended action. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Beloit and a second.
Second.
Second by Dr. Newmaster. Any discussion? Oh, Ms. Daniels?
Just briefly, it's a difficult decision and I just appreciate all the time and thought that went into making these very difficult decisions about very dedicated ones.
Thank you. Further discussion? All right, this will require a roll call vote. I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Daniels,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Newmaster,
Aye.
Strikeoji,
Aye.
Thompson, I, Arcan,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye. And the motion passes. Thank you. We'll now move into operational item C3, action on resolution approving the employment of a board member.
All right, Minnesota statute section 123B.195 authorizes school districts to employ a school board member. There is a reasonable expectation at the beginning of the fiscal year or at the time the contract is entered into or extended that the amount to be earned by the school board member will not exceed $8,000 in that fiscal year. Saying we have 3 resolutions that we acted upon separately. So the first one, first resolution would be to approve the employment of board member Jessica Ellison to work in the following positions. That would be as a substitute teacher.
You've heard the recommended action. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Arcand and a second.
Second.
Second by Dr. Newmaster. This will require a roll call vote for which I will abstain.
Daniels,
Aye.
Newmaster,
Aye.
Strikeoji,
Aye.
Thompson, I, Arcan,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Motion passes.
Then the next recommended action would be to approve the employment of board member Deb Beloit to work in the following positions: playground, lunchroom supervisor.
And this will also require a roll call vote where Ms. Beloit will abstain.
So moved.
Yes, could I get an action, Dr. Newmaster? Thank you, and a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Daniels. And this will require a roll call vote.
Daniels,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Newmaster,
Aye.
Strikeoji,
Aye.
Thompson, I, Arcan,
Aye.
And the motion passes.
And finally,
Okay, and C5?
recommended action to approve the employment of board member Kathleen Daniels to work in the following position: substitute teacher.
Can I get a motion to approve the recommended action? Ms. Beloit, and a second. Second by Ms. Strikeoji. And this will require a roll call vote at which Ms. Daniels will abstain.
Ellison,
Aye.
Newmaster,
Aye.
Strikeoji,
Aye.
Thompson, I, Arcan,
Aye.
Lloyd,
And motion passes. And finally, operational item C6, the approval of the resolution supporting commitment to equity and inclusion. Had quite a bit of discussion. So could I get a motion to approve? So moved.
second.
Oh,
Get over there.
Ms. Beloit and Ms. Thompson as a second. Any further discussion? All right, this will require a roll call vote.
Daniels,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Newmaster,
Aye.
Strikeoji,
Aye.
Thompson, I, Arcan,
Aye.
Lloyd,
And the motion passes. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
This is like test on Chair Ellison's understanding of Robert's rules. Okay, could I get a motion to adjourn?
Chair Ellison. I move for an adjournment.
And could I get a second?
Second.
Motion by Dr. Arcan, second by Ms. Strikeoji, and we are adjourned.
I have a